Hey, Sassy Stuff. I'm Emma, and today I'm here with Inside Texas's LC, and we're going to talk about this Texas Georgia matchup. Let's get to it. So, LC, this is Texas's first year in the SEC. They are the highest ranked SEC team. They have the best record in the SEC. They're going to the SEC championship, contending both for that and a national championship. Are you proud of your team?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, this is, as a Texas fan, I think you have unrealistic expectations every year, right? You're meant to win things every year. And for people like myself who are of a certain vintage, we've been in the desert for a very long time. And having Sark at the helm, I think, has really altered our perception of what is possible. Winning the Big 12 last year was a big deal. And I think the possibility of going to the SEC championship and winning that, even the fact that it's a possibility, is something that I think a lot of fans need to, especially Texas fans, need to really appreciate, because it's not something that's easy to do. If you look at our counterparts, if you want to call them that, we like to refer to them as the little brother, our sibling over at A&M. They've been in the league for 13 years and haven't been to an SEC championship game. So yes, this is a big deal. I think we're very proud of them. But again, we have expectations. So
As you
I
should.
don't know whether this is fulfilling enough for some people.
Well, I get that because you guys have the best players money can buy. You have Steve Sarkisian, who is an exceptional coach. You have not only the incredible quarterback that is Quinn Ewers, but you also have your backup being a Manning. So you're pretty stacked. And so if I was rooting for Texas, I would expect a national championship at this point, especially where they were last year. But they have the momentum on their side for sure. So they've been on a 5 game winning streak since that Georgia loss in October. So pretty successful, I'd like to say.
I think one of the things that is fair to say is that yes, I think Texas has an excellent roster. I do think though that Texas has leveraged NIL very well, frankly. I mean, obviously, the turnaround is a result of NIL. It's a result of the transfer portal. But one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough, specifically with Sarkeesian and certainly the organization writ large, is just the roster management. There's depth in that locker room. And I think if you look at an Ole Miss, if you look at Ohio State, who's rumored to have a $20 million roster, or certainly Oregon, who have, I mean, in this today's recruiting class, I mean, they're throwing cash all over the place. And look, I'm not going to say that Texas is skimping on these things. That's not what's happening. That being said, though, you're looking when you have depth on your team. One of the things that isn't talked about in NIL is player retention. And the fact that we're able to keep these players, develop these players, and put them in a position, the fact that you can have a starting offensive line that is played together almost 3 full years is, again, it's a rarity. So yes, I think expectations are there. I do think what if I am to say what I am most proud about, just in terms of the structure of this team, is I think they've done a really smart job of leveraging their assets and creating depth. They're not going to overspend on a player. They're going to use what they have to the best of their abilities, and I think that's what's showing. Obviously, it's time will tell, but as you pointed out, this being the first season in the league, I'm very proud that there's some these these things are bearing fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sark is a coach that people want to play for, and that's so important in these times of NIL when you have to recruit these players. And I always go back to it. Nick Saban says you don't get depth from the portal, but Sark kind of has, and that's amazing. A little bit there, but then he's great at recruiting on the road. So it's kind of a well balanced attack on the recruitment side as well, and on the offensive side. But they did struggle a little bit running against Georgia. So do you think they're gonna do better this week?
Yeah, well, I think look, the sports are the ultimate perishable good, right? You're get one shot at it, and it's not going to be the same. I mean, I was looking at this prior to you and I chatting, just to review what was going on there, and Georgia had 30 points off of 283 total yards.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? Well, that tells you that they had fantastic starting position. And that starting position came off of turnovers. There were 7 turnovers total in that game.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, and I think it would be I think that it would be a little bit of a fool's errand to assume that what happened in October is what's going to happen here in December, simply because, first of all, both teams are going to be different. They're coming into this with more experience, and I do think that that game. Frankly, I don't think either offense really played all that well. I mean, Texas had 29 rushing yards. 29, 29 rushing yards in the entirety of the game. And bear in mind, Georgia only had 107. So this was not a high offensive output game. Now, both defenses I think are very stout. I think Kirby does a phenomenal job of scheming. And if you were to watch that game again, which I did earlier this week, you're seeing a lot of really smart changes in coverage post snap. Right, he's gonna start with 2 high, end up single high. He's playing mixed match coverages, and I think that's a really smart thing to do, especially when you can start to get some pressure on Quinn and make him make decisions early. He has proven that that is a challenge for him. So I do not expect what we saw in October. I think we are going to experience a very different game. I I'm not I'm not yet in the position to tell you like where I think that game is going to go. I still think that on paper Texas should win this game. They absolutely should win this game. That being said, the game isn't played on paper. So we've already demonstrated that Kirby is excellent at this. He's very good when you give him time to game plan. He understands Sark pretty well, certainly from his time in Alabama. This I think will be a very, very different game.
Oh, I think so as well. And one thing I would love to see in this game is Quinn Ewers standing upright for the majority of it. I think the O line really needs to hold. And have you seen improvements? Really digging deep into this team on that O line.
Sure. Well, the O line has been fantastic, certainly in the last few games when it comes to running the ball. After that Georgia game, the coaches really challenged the offensive line to start establishing that rushing game. As we pointed out, like 29 rushing yards at any level is ridiculous.
Glad.
It's horrible. And we went into College Station last week, and we had one running back. My God, Trey Wisner, that young man, 33 carries, 180 plus yards. But the fact that we're able to do that, and you're talking about an A&M defense that has 3 NFL players on that defensive line. So we're not going against scrubs here when this happens. So I do think that you will see some improvement in the offensive line. Where I think you're going to really I think where the questions are, and this is what you're alluding to, Emma, and it's a smart observation, is can Quinn handle pressure? I'm not
Yeah.
talking about sacks. I'm simply talking about pressure. And he's going to get pressure. I mean, it's a Georgia defense. They're absolutely going to pressure him. His pocket presence has not been what we want it to be. I do think that arguably there has been some degradation in terms of that. Some of that is injuries. I think that's the case, but I also think that there's a mental aspect that Quinn just isn't quite releasing that ball like he used to, and that is going to play a major role in this game because he definitely certainly left some yards on the table during that first Georgia game.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, his biggest issue is I think he's so accident prone. He gets injured so often that it makes him a little scared at times. And you can't do that as the QB. You have to be confident in every single move that you make, or else bad things happen. And so I'm hoping to see a more confident Quinn Ewers. But we also have Manning, who I think has done great anytime he's come in. And in that Georgia game, I think he was able to give Ewers the time to settle back into the game. So if that needs to happen again, you have a silver lining right there, which is really good. But moving past the quarterbacks, who are the other X factors you really see making more contributions in this game?
Well, as I alluded to, I think Trey Wisner has established himself as our bell cow. Or our cowbell rather. He is going to be the person that we're leaning on in the run game. It is starting the season. The Texas running back room was arguably one of the best in the country. We have C.J. Baxter, we have Christian Clark, we had Blue, we have Wisner, and we had got hurt. We lost CJ Baxter at the very beginning of this during training camp. And there were a lot of questions there. And frankly, the offense has taken some time. It's taken us to week 14 to really start to establish what that looks like. I certainly think Trey Wisner is going to be a major component in this, certainly for the offense. I do think, I mean, if you get a chance to watch Jade Barron, he is up for the Thorpe Award. He's a very impressive player. What you do not see Texas do very often is busted coverages. They're very, very good. They're sound all the way around. As you noted, I mean, again, it was a bad offensive game. But Beck is only having 175 yards passing in that game.
Right.
So the people I'm going to look for, there's a couple that didn't really shine in that first game, and one of those is going to be Colin Simmons. He's a true freshman, has really started to establish himself on the edge. He has become the factor that we thought he would be, certainly at an early age. Now that he's got some reps under his belt, I expect big things from him in this game. He's a very unique player. He's a singularity. He's not the type of edge rusher that you generally see, and I think he's really going to challenge Georgia's tackles. Now, on the offensive side, certainly it's going to be Quinn. Certainly you think of people like Bond, certainly Wisner, but I want to know whether Kelvin Banks is healthy. This is our starting left guard or tackle rather, arguably, if not guaranteed, an All-American, certainly a first-round draft pick. And he got injured in that A&M game. Now, he was replaced by redshirt freshman in Trevor Gooseby, who honestly didn't miss a beat. And again, he's going against an NFL player as a redshirt freshman. And frankly, you wouldn't know that Kelvin wasn't in there. So I do think that, again, that's laying back to that depth we talked about earlier and establishing the roster as a whole. But I know this is a roundabout way of saying it, but I do think the people that are going to really play the biggest factor in this are going to be those people on the line. Is it going to be Gooseby for Texas? Is it going to be Simmons? Is he going to have that all-star breakout game that everybody thinks he's going to have? So those are two players that I would definitely look for. I would absolutely be checking the injury report on Thursday, seeing where Banks is on that. My suspicion he is going to be questionable on Thursday, probable on Saturday, but we'll see. We haven't really heard where he is on that just yet. But those are the things for me. I mean, if you're looking at this, Emma, I would love to know your thoughts on that. Maybe even on the Georgia side, who are you looking to see make an impact?
Well, for the Georgia side, I mean, we don't have Trevor Etienne anymore. So it's like which running back is really going to step up for them and really open up their offense and give them a real shot to have a dynamic attack. But Carson Beck, I think he is the determining factor sometimes on if this
Sure.
team is successful or not. And so he did have 3 interceptions when he played you guys the first time. He's had more interceptions since.
Yeah.
It's bad sometimes. And against Georgia Tech, I felt like he was off for 3 quarters. And granted, against Georgia Tech, you can play 1 quarter and end up winning in 8 overtimes.
Yeah.
But he really has to settle into himself, and we have seen him do that at home a lot of the times. And that is another aspect. I think having that home field advantage for Georgia as
Sure.
well, because
Yeah.
they know Mercedes-Benz. They played there against Clemson earlier this year.
Yeah.
So I think that is a huge X factor for them as well, as having their people there, knowing that stadium, playing in that stadium in week 1. And then also one thing I love about Kirby Smart is he is great at halftime adjustments. So
Yeah.
I think he can really rally his team to a win there as well. But how do you feel about playing in kind of hostile environment in what's supposed to be a neutral site game?
Well, I think this team, I don't know the exact numbers on this, but I believe they've won 10 or 11 road games in a row, not neutral site games. And this would certainly
Mhm.
qualify as a neutral site game. This is a team that revels in being the away team. So much so that because they're the highest ranked team in this game, they get to choose their jerseys, and they
Yeah.
chose their away jerseys. I think that's very significant. They love playing the role of the interloper, right? The person that's coming in here and trying to unseat the people that are there. And going back to Georgia a little bit too, I really can empathize with Georgia fans this year because Texas's offense has also been wildly inconsistent. I mean, you'll watch that Georgia Alabama game, that first half, and you're like, my God, I don't understand who this team is.
It's
Second
crazy.
half, they're all world.
Yeah.
Just like, it's I mean, Texas is certainly capable of the same things. You'll look at them, and you'll be completely scratching your head, and then they'll just have a quarter where it's you can't even believe it's the same team. So it really is going to be an issue of which offense shows up and shows out. I do think that I'm very confident that both Kirby and PK, our defensive coordinator, are going to have those guys ready to play.
Yep.
But it's really just going to be an issue of those offenses and how they can adapt in that environment. But I think coming off of playing in College Station, there's a lot of mythos about whether that's actually a significant place to play. It's certainly very
Yeah.
loud, but if you look at the record for the Aggies at home, it's actually not that big of an advantage.
No,
So
nothing beats Death Valley for me. I don't
sure,
Kyle Field, whatever.
yeah, I agree. I'm
Like
with
you
you.
said, you
Like
gotta do this, but
I would much rather play in Kyle Field than I would in
yes,
Death Valley.
yes.
Absolutely. So, but it's I we were talking about this. We do a live on Monday, and we had a one of our former players. He was on the national championship team, and I really was just baiting him. I was like, "Tell me how awesome it is to play in the away, the icy whites." And he's an athlete, so he's like, it doesn't make any difference, but it sure as hell did to me. Those things are great. I love
Yeah.
those. I love the icy whites. I love that we're coming out in those things. They look sharp. They're clean. I'm really excited to see that at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think that's a really cool sight to see. And as you pointed out at the beginning of this, having Texas in the SEC, in the SEC championship that first year, you literally couldn't ask for anything better.
No.
Maybe we win the game. That's the best thing we could ask for, certainly. But it's been a great ride for sure.
And the good thing is you're still in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So you still have a shot at the national championship. I know it would be amazing and crazy bragging rights to come into the SEC and say, no, we're the Kings now. I think that would be awesome for Texas, but you still have every opportunity to win the national championship. And so I was speaking to Molly earlier this week about if Quinn Ewers is feeling even a little off in that game, I would get him off the field and worry about bigger and better things to come than maybe that bye week, because you want to make sure your team's as healthy as they can be going into that national championship run to get there. So what do you think about that?
Well, we've got so what is it? The I think it's the seventh, right? So let's say Texas loses that game. They've got a home field game. That's either going to be the 20th or the 21st. So
Yes.
you've got close to 2 weeks to get healthy. I do think I agree with you. What we're starting to see with Arch now is we're getting those packages. You saw a couple, he was in for 3 different series, 3 different runs, and those were all 3 very different run plays. So what that tells me is he has a better command of the playbook that he had certainly at the beginning of the year. He's starting to understand the nuances of the game a lot better. I don't know that I don't know that I would pull Quinn if he's, because you got to get him right. The
Yes.
best chance we have to win a national championship is with Quinn Ewers.
Correct.
As much as I look, Arch throws bombs is a great shirt to have because it's true. It's awesome to have him in there, and it's
Yeah.
certainly very fun. It's exciting. It charges up the fans. Quinn Quinn is one of those players that I think gets a really, really bad rap. Um, he is a one of the most even keeled athletes I think I've ever seen. The kid doesn't get shook. He is straight the entire time. He had a pick six against the Aggies. Now, certainly, I think it was a bad decision to throw that, but that's a tip ball. I mean, that's not on him. Now, again, could he have made a better decision? Sure. I do think I think Quinn's best football is still ahead of him. I think he was absolutely hurt in that first game. I think you saw that with the ab. I think, or the oblique rather, and I think you're starting to see a more developed Quinn. I mean, I I don't know. It's going to be hard to say, but having 2 weeks essentially after this championship game, I think is going to be big for everybody, right?
Yes.
Everybody that's in the playoffs. Now, if you're not playing in a championship game, you get almost 3 weeks, right? You're
Yep.
getting that healthy. You're getting the opportunity to get healthy there, and this is what Lane Kiffin was talking about earlier. But Lane's doing his politicking now.
He
So
is on Twitter. Everyone go watch.
Lane is leaning into the politicking. And look,
Oh,
I love me some Lane Kiffin. So
I
I'm
love it.
totally here for it. I think he's great for the sport. I don't necessarily agree with him, but
I don't agree with it
I
at
think it's
all, but
great.
it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you now? How are you feeling? Because for all intents and purposes, it looks like Alabama's in, and they are very much the controversial bubble team. Are
They're
you able
always
to look at this
become
objectively? How are you feeling that Alabama's in this thing?
well, I think it could go either way. I think everybody has a case between those four teams. Miami does have the better record. South Carolina's the hottest right now. Old Miss has better wins by how much they won by, and Alabama they have a better record right now overall between strength of schedule, who they beat, how they beat them. They went into Death Valley and absolutely obliterated LSU, and that's not a small thing. Death Valley is a really hard place to play, but my biggest thing would be if SMU loses to Clemson, then I'm a little 50-50. I will always say put Bama in because I'm a big Bama supporter, but I look at SMU and I'm like they did nothing wrong. They went and they
Sure.
got to their conference championship game and they lost. I think if they lose by a small margin, then I think SMU should go in. If they get blown out by Clemson, then I think yeah, put Bama in because Clemson lost to two teams that Bama beat. So it's a question for sure. I don't like always being the hot take. I wish they would just do their part and beat Oklahoma. Because it's
Sure.
not,
Yeah.
it was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And I think the Ryan Williams call was a little egregious. And if you don't think that if that touchdown counted, that they could have had the momentum to come back, then you're crazy. But it is what it is, and they're gonna put somebody in that somebody else is not gonna like. I would put Bama in objectively just because of strength of schedule, and the wins they do have. Their ceiling is as high as anybody's, but their floor is scary, and embarrassing. So that's kind of how I feel on them. I do think, especially if Georgia wins the SEC championship, then you have another notch. You say, I beat the SEC champion. So that
Sure.
could be good for Bama. But I really think it comes down to this ACC game. If SMU wins, then of course Bama should be in. If SMU loses, then I'm like, my conscience is going a little bit like, ooh, ooh, ooh. So we're going to see. What do you
Well,
think?
this is what has been great about this year. But there's been a lot of things that are great about this year, but one of the things I think is really valuable is you're starting to see where people are putting their emphasis. So
Yeah,
here's what I mean by that. Do we put too much emphasis on strength of schedule? Do we put too much emphasis on losses? Do we put too much emphasis on championships? I
yeah,
mean, the truth of the matter is what this committee is charged with doing is being an objective party that looks at the totality of the team. For example, you could have I would to me, I mean, I don't think you can look me in the eye and tell me that if SMU played Alabama in a neutral field, that Alabama wouldn't work them like a part-time job. I mean,
correct.
so again, all of those things I think have to factor into it, and it's a hard thing to do. I don't envy the committee. They are college football's whipping boy. I mean, they do take a lot of heat, but you when you start seeing the takes on Twitter, and I highly recommend if you really want to bathe in stupidity, go to Twitter. There is a lot of just phenomenal takes on there that are very myopic, right? You're looking at one aspect of this. Is it strength of schedule? Is it like opponents? Is it all these things? All the things that Lane brought up to justify his cause are certainly valuable if
Yeah,
you look at it through that lens. So has Texas played anybody this year? As an example, I don't think so.
I don't either.
I don't think so either. That being said, I absolutely think they passed the eyeball test. I think
Correct.
if you watch enough football, you understand how these schemes work and how these players look. And I mean, I think they're a very good football team. If they lose to Georgia, that case isn't going away, right?
Mhm.
The case isn't going away that they haven't played anybody and they're in the playoff. Do they get brand bias? Absolutely. They absolutely get brand bias. That being said, I do think they do pass the eyeball test. And this weekend is going to be a big it's going to be yet another big test for them to see if they can establish themselves as a legitimate team. I think a lot of people feel like they are, but they have to do this on a massive stage to really kind of put to rest some of those negative takes, which again are valid.
They're very valid, and like you were saying, it's kind of hard because I think everybody looks at it differently, whether it's head to head or strength of schedule. But honestly, in this current model that we're looking at, you're not gonna get the 12 best teams in the playoffs when you
Sure.
factor in conference champions. I mean, the fact, and I think Clemson is a good football team, but they're a 9-3 team. They lost
Sure.
to Georgia. They lost to South Carolina. That's two teams in the SEC, and then they lost one in the ACC. And they're a good team, but are they one of the 12 best? No, I think Ole Miss is better than them. South Carolina is obviously better than them. I think Miami is probably better than them.
Miami
Um,
has no
well,
defense. Let's be clear.
Miami doesn't have a defense,
Miami has zero defense.
but Cade makes questionable calls all the time that it
Sure.
doesn't matter what the defense does. Cade hands it to them. So I think you're not in this model with these conference championships getting in automatically, that you're never going to get it. I want the conference championships to really mean something.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answers for that right now. I'll start brainstorming and send notes, but I don't know. But we just have to look, like you said, at what is in front of us. And Bama would absolutely beat SMU on a neutral site any given day of the week. So it is what it is, and people aren't gonna like it, but I think Bama's in the playoffs regardless. It doesn't make me feel good. I didn't feel good when Bama made it
You
over
feel
Florida
fine.
State.
Let's just be
I
clear about
felt
this.
good
It's
as a
not like you're
fan.
lamenting
I'm
this.
an empath, Lucas.
Okay, you're doing all right.
I'm okay. I liked going to the playoffs last year. I thought we deserved it. I think we would deserve it this year as well as one of the 12 best teams. But it doesn't, like, I feel bad for SMU. They did everything right. Florida State did everything right last year, and there's only so much you can do. So yes, I think Bama's in. It's gonna make people upset, but nobody likes Bama except Bama fans. So just like Texas,
I'm
I don't think
familiar with
people
the
like
sentiment.
Texas.
Yeah. Very familiar
um,
with this sentiment. Yeah.
yeah. But looking at this game, I want Texas to win. I want them to show that the first game was kind of a fluke, because Quinn Ewers was hurt and they kind of just seemed shaky the whole night. So, what are the keys to victory that you really see for this Texas team?
Sure, and I want to push back a little bit there, Emma. I want to give Georgia credit. I mean, what they did on defense, they played with a 50 front, which is they went with the nose tackle and really brought down those linebackers to get 5 down. Which really, they said, all right, look, we're going to make you throw the ball, which on paper seems to be Texas's strength, but they really scouted that really well and understood that that intermediary game was just not there for Quinn in that game. I think the keys to this game are we going to see the running game that we saw in the first game, 29 yards, or are we going to see the running game that we saw the last 2 weeks of the season versus Kentucky
Mhm.
and A&M? I think that really is the key, quite frankly. I don't know that Georgia needs to necessarily do anything different, frankly. I mean, they are going to be playing a defense that is just as fast as them.
Yep.
And I think that's going to be a challenge for them. We saw that in the first game. The defense for Texas played fantastic in that Georgia game. They just had horrible field position the whole time.
Yep.
I mean, we know that from the stats that we talked about at the beginning of this. So I think the keys are, can Texas establish an honest running game? Can they turn that screen game into chunk yards twice? I mean, they don't really need to do it even all that often, but if they can break one or two of those, that really changes the dynamic of how you have to defend Texas. And I think that's a massive play in this. I'm going to be really interested if you're watching at home that first series where Georgia is on defense. I want you to see what their line is doing. They have 5 people down there. Are they lining up in more of a nickel package? I think that's going to be really telling. Obviously, that's what they did in the first game, but interestingly enough, not what they did against Georgia Tech. So what are they going to bring to the table here? I think that's really the key is, can Texas run the ball? is the intermediary game there. I think those 2 things are really gonna make a massive impact. If I had to pick one, it would be that running game.
Yeah. I also look at if Quinn Ewers can stay settled with this incredible Georgia defense. That's what Kirby does well. He's a
Yeah,
defensive mind and he knows how to rattle people.
he does, yeah.
If Ewers is able to settle into the game, I think they're gonna pull out a win. But if he's not, then I'm a little worried. And like you said, they need to run the ball.
I mean, it will be everything. You'll notice that, what Sark tends to do is really play his offense, which is going to be the RPOs, which is going to be the screen game, those intermediate passes. I would say first 2 series, he's gonna throw a bomb. He doesn't care whether he connects or not. He just wants to make you honest. And then really as the game progresses is when you start to see that run game. So that's been the general game plan up to this point. I'm interested to see those first 2 series, how that goes. Sark is all world when it comes to scripting plays. So we'll see. We'll see what he brings in. I can't tell you right now that I'm super confident, but at the same time, Texas should win.
Yep. On paper, for sure. Me, I'm hoping for a fun game.
I just hope everybody has a great time. I just want everybody to have fun. Everybody gets some orange slices, some juice boxes. That's what everybody's really looking for.
Yes, I want to eat my popcorn and enjoy the game.
Good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.